Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I'm really happy to see all of you. Really happy also to see Brother Sami. I've been getting him a lot on my YouTube suggestions. You all have experienced that as well? And it's like, I'm saying, who is this? He looks like somebody that I know. He looks like somebody that I know. Turned out that his father was also very popular, is still popular, on a independent channel, Mustaqilla, where he was doing a lot of debate and hosting people and what have you. But it's good to meet you finally in person. Our brother Sam is so excited to be here in the States, where the streets are very wide, wider than London. People actually drive on the right side of the street, not on the wrong side of the street. And he got so excited that he decided to drive from Dallas to Memphis. Because he said, look, man, these streets are so big, somebody's got to drive on them. So we're really happy to have him with us. And alhamdulillah, he's been in the US for about, from what you told me, I think you've been here for
end of November.
3 months. That's really lovely, alhamdulillah. And we are very, very blessed to have you. So for those of us who are going beyond YouTube and just meeting you for the first time, I do have your professional bio here. Brother Sami is the managing director of the International Interest, a global risk and intelligence company. He advises government institutions, global companies, NGOs on the geopolitical dynamics of Europe and the Middle East and North Africa region, and has expertise on advertising and commercial issues related to volatile political environments and their implications on the market. He is a frequent guest on the BBC and Al Jazeera, both Arabic and English. And like I said, this is maybe the professional aspect of it, but for those of you who are meeting you for the first time, if you would just tell us maybe a little bit about yourself.
Jazakallah khair, barakallahu feek. Assalamu alaikum everybody. And may Allah bless this huge institution that you have, mashallah. In America, mashallah, you do everything bigger. Your medium-sized portions are our large portions. Your large portions are, I've never seen it in the UK. Barakallahu feekum for having me. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam. The Arabs, they have a saying, A'udhu billahi min kalimat ana. I seek protection from the word I, and I want to apply it here in particular. To put it in very brief terms, my day job in very simple terms is to answer questions relating to politics so that companies, governments, NGOs can make decisions in a way that where they will not be affected very badly by the politics that are taking place. For example, in 2019, Donald Trump ordered the assassination of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani. So all the companies wanted to know, is there going to be war between Iran and the US? If there is going to be war, then it will cost us 15, 20 million to wind down our operations in Iraq and in some of these other countries. We don't want to spend that money, so we want to be sure there's going to be war before we decide to withdraw. And then they will consult somebody, we'll sit there at the table and we'll give them the scenarios, and then if you really charge a good price, you put yourself out on a limb, you give a prediction, only Allah knows the ghaib, but you tell them based on these scenarios what happens next. I tell you a very interesting story. There was once upon a time an alcohol company. Before you say astaghfirullah, wait till you hear the story. So when they approached, I was working for a company at the time. This is before I set up my own. So you're a young person, you're a graduate, you're getting a good salary, and you're doing really well, alhamdulillah, and the company, they like you. And they say you have to do work for an alcohol company. So I went, astaghfirullah, 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 astaghfirullah. How do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? How do I get out of this, So I came up with an idea. I said I will go to the initial meeting and then be sick during the project. When I went to the original meeting, and the reason I tell you the story is to give you an indication of what the work is like. They said, this was 2013. They said, we've come to consult your company. I was an analyst and there was the partner next to me. They said, we have a problem. What's your problem? They said, in Turkey, Erdogan has passed a law, no alcohol after 10 p.m. At the time, we had a WhatsApp group. People were saying, Erdogan is saying alcohol halal in the day, haram in the night. So the vice president of this global company that owns 8 alcohol beverage companies says, as a result of this law, we will see a 35% drop in our profits. So the partner says, so what do you need from us? He said, next year there's an election in Turkey. We want to know, is Erdogan going to win or is he going to lose? Because the negotiations with the Kurdish separatists is collapsing and we believe there might be a war on the horizon, will this finally topple Erdogan? So I said, if Erdogan loses, they said if Erdogan loses, we will take the 35% hit for this year and then lobby the next government to reverse the law. And I said, if Erdogan wins, they said, if he wins, we will roll back our alcohol offerings and we will go put our money, invest in something like bottling or the like. I told him I will take this project. Erdogan will win 2014, he will win 2019, and he will win 2024, inshallah. At the end of the day, it's mainly assessing the politics and how it impacts people, and they want to manage who their partners are or the like. But the one thing that I won't go on too long about it, the fascinating thing for me doing it is that I found that the Western world doesn't actually control the world. I found that they are often just as confused about situations as we are. I found that many times their questions were more about what if the Muslim leader does this? What if bin Salman does this? What if bin Zayed does this? And you grow up with this mentality that Muslims have no agency. But when you sit with these policymakers and decision makers, you realize they're making their plans on the basis of trying to prevent Muslim agency from manifesting itself, and they are concerned that if Muslims manifest that agency, then a change will happen that will threaten their particular interests. And to be honest, Sheikh, it's a very liberating feeling when you start to realize that actually Allah truly is the only one who has the power, and that there's always opportunities in every scenario. And sometimes perhaps the reason the Ummah hasn't taken many of them is because in the sense where they believe the world is controlled by certain groups, they fail to see the ability to assert their own interests as an Ummah.
MashaAllah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your endeavors, Ya Rabbil Alameen, give you more success, bring more companies to consult with you, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Remember me when you get that commission though, inshallah. You're right. So, I know you became popular within the Muslim community as a result of you speaking about Palestine. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your efforts in this regard. People have questions about what is going on. Just give you an idea. It has been over 110 days since the bombardment of Gaza has started. So many children have died in Gaza. Just give you an idea of how many children died. Children, we're not talking about the people. How many children have died? If we were to pray janazah every day for every child that died, that was killed in Gaza, we will pray janazah every day for the next 27 years. That's how many children have died in Gaza. Question that I have, or one of the questions that were being asked, lots of demonstrations, talking about like the majority of the people. You spoke about social media once, I remember, about how the majority of people want this to stop. It has not. And the question is, why haven't the things that were attempted by the Muslim community worked? You can boycott this, you can boycott that, you can demonstrate here, and you can reach out. But it's been 100 days and it has not stopped. If you can just shed light on why did it not work, whatever it is that we were doing.
Jazakallah khair. First of all, just in response to the first part, that you became popular or the like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Fatir, مَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ الْعِزَّةَ فَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ جَمِيعًا. Those who seek glory, let them know all glory belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What people have resonated with is not Sami al-Hamdi. What they've resonated with is the justice that embodies Palestine, is Palestine that embodies justice, and is the fitrah that resonates with everything that is right and just. Allah elevates those who stand with justice and humiliates those who decide to abandon it. And therefore I am aware that Allah, alhamdulillah, has showered His favor in this particular regard, but I am well aware that it is from Allah alone. I'm well aware that it is as a result of aligning with justice and nothing to do with Sami himself. In terms of the actual point that you were mentioning, I think that there is certainly a perception that all of the efforts that the Muslims have been doing hasn't brought about the outcome that the Muslims have wanted with regards to ending the genocide. And there are a number of reasons for that. Before I get to those reasons, it's important to emphasize what has been achieved. When the genocide first started, the Secretary of State Antony Blinken put out a tweet on his Twitter account, which said that he spoke to his Turkish counterpart and they discussed the escalation in Gaza and Palestine, and they also discussed the ceasefire. Within half an hour, that tweet was taken down, and it was reported in the Huffington Post that Blinken had lambasted the intern who had put up that tweet and said, we do not talk about ceasefires or pauses with regards to what's happening. Israel is going to have free license to do what it wants in Gaza. And then he went to Tel Aviv to show his support, where he said, I'm here as a Jew. Blinken, when he was in Tel Aviv, decided that he was supposed to go back to Washington, but while he was in Tel Aviv, said, no, we need to go to the regional powers. And Washington Post reported that the reason he did that was because, quote, to tamp down on public anger. Blinken identified that there is a potential threat to Israel's ability to commit its genocide, and therefore he went to regional countries to try to secure support to help to keep you quiet, to keep Muslims quiet, to get them not to talk so much about Gaza. He managed to secure a fatwa from Saudi Arabia. He managed to secure a statement from the UAE. He managed to get Erdogan to talk about neutrality and mediation. And then he went back to Washington and said the Muslim leaders have demonstrated that they will stand aside with regards to what's happening and the genocide can continue. Biden was so excited about it that on the 20th of October, he proposed a bill to Congress where he asked for $14 billion to give to Egypt and Jordan so that they can take in those Palestinians. On the 28th of October, Biden came out and said that I'm no longer asking Congress for that 14 billion and I will not accept Palestinians to be displaced from Gaza. Why? It wasn't because Biden had a change of heart. It's because 2 days earlier, a poll came out that showed that Biden was now lagging behind Trump and other Republican rivals in 6 swing states. And the Reuters article that talked about this poll said that the fascinating thing about these polls is that Biden was falling in the polls not because of the economy, but because of his stance with Palestine and Gaza. And what was even more shocking about him falling in the polls is that he was falling in the polls over an issue where American troops weren't even on the ground. Usually when a president falls in the polls over a foreign policy issue, it's because our boys are dying in Iraq, they're dying in Afghanistan, they're dying. They said the fascinating thing about these polls was that Biden was losing ground to the Republicans, even though American troops weren't dying in Gaza or they weren't dying abroad, which meant that the reason he was falling in the polls was because there was a shift in public opinion that was taking place. And that shift in public opinion was as a result of the information that was going out, being amplified by Muslims on social media that broke Israel's monopoly over the narrative by shaking the algorithm, by showing that Palestinian content was so popular, which meant the algorithm put the Palestinian content on every single phone on this earth, meaning those who had never seen the Palestinian-Israel issue before finally saw it with their own eyes, and they were so horrified by the genocide that they decided to flip on Biden. They decided to go from being Zionist to being pro-Palestinian, and that's what was resulting in the fall in the polls. And that led to a consequential event in which Blinken, 2 days after the poll came out, goes to Tel Aviv and he says to Netanyahu that we need to change the tactics. We can't just no longer talk about a pause. We need to market the genocide and we need to now talk about a humanitarian pause. We went from no pause to humanitarian pause because Blinken was worried about the fall in the polls that was being brought about by an ummah that refused to be quiet. And Axios reports that Netanyahu was so horrified that Blinken was suggesting a humanitarian pause that Axios, the Israeli paper, reports that Netanyahu told Blinken, before I agree to a humanitarian pause, I need to know this isn't Biden buckling and trying to lure me into a ceasefire. Which is why when Biden came off the plane after the humanitarian pause, if you remember, he told the journalists that yes, the humanitarian pause has come about. It came late, but better late than never. He showed his disgruntlement with Netanyahu dragging his heels. Blinken went from no ceasefire to doing a new marketing project of, instead of saying we're going to bomb the daylights out of them, let's be very cute and send them a letter and say we're coming to bomb your house, but we're willing to give you 4 hours every day to leave, and you can go through a humanitarian corridor under the protection of the Israeli army. That shift is because of an ummah that moved, that mobilized, that shifted that public opinion. When the Muslims refused to sit down, refused to be satisfied with a humanitarian pause, what the Muslims did next is they brought the pictures of the Nakba and they brought the pictures of this humanitarian corridor, which made Biden fall even more in the polls in the US. When the next polls came out from Gallup, they showed Biden falling even further in those 6 swing states. But not only that, analysts were now saying that those six swing states happen to be states where the Muslims potentially have the deciding vote. They are 6 swing states where there is the largest concentration of Muslims in the United States. They are Michigan, they are Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, these places. And as a result, we went from humanitarian pause to Biden, according to CNN, telling Netanyahu that as a result of the, quote, bombardment of the videos documenting the atrocities, I cannot support you in the way that you want. You don't have months, you probably only have a matter of weeks. And that's what led from the humanitarian pause to the hostage truce that came place. Ibadallah, if I was to say to you, did Blinken want a hostage truce? Did Netanyahu want a hostage truce? Did Biden want a hostage truce? Did any of the Israelis want a hostage truce? The reason there was a hostage truce is because Biden was buckling. And not only that, as a result of Netanyahu desperately trying to rescue his political career, he was rejecting the offer by Hamas to hand over the hostages. If you remember that when Hamas let go of the 2 hostages, the elderly ones, the one who turned around and said Shalom Alaikum before she left, if you remember, the Times of Israel reported when she was released, they said that Netanyahu and his allies are frustrated at the release of the hostages because it will dampen the desire for a ground offensive. When that report came out, the families of the hostages went to Netanyahu's house and they protested in front of his house. When the police came and beat them up, thousands took to the streets in Tel Aviv demanding Netanyahu resign and demanding Netanyahu be pulled out. The Muslims amplified that voice of the Israelis to say, look, even the Israelis are turning against Netanyahu. So when Netanyahu found himself in the hostage truce under pressure, the Israelis panicked so much over an ummah that refused to be quiet, that made Blinken and Biden buckle, that Ben Gvir went to give a press conference unilaterally and he said, Netanyahu, if you extend this truce by 1 more day, we will topple your government. Which is why on the night when it was believed that we would have a permanent ceasefire, Netanyahu panicked and instead decided to go to war again and decided to break that truce and blame the Hamas rockets. What I'm saying here is that although we're not achieving the outcome that we want, we're certainly making it difficult for them to commit the genocide that they want. When the Israelis are spending billions on a PR campaign on social media to shadow ban your accounts, to shut down your accounts, to restrict #Palestine, they don't spend billions over something that is not a threat. They're spending billions because they've identified a potential threat that needs to be tamed, which is why they needed the fatwa of Abdurrahman al-Sudais, why they needed the Medina khutbah to be about don't talk about Gaza, only make dua. Because if you talk about Gaza, it will turn against your rulers. The views expressed are the speaker's own and do not reflect the organization or those who invited me, and they didn't ask me what I would say. I didn't tell them what I would say. This is the speaker's own freedom of speech, and the organization have just invited me for analysis, and I'm only providing my analysis. And if everybody wants to see the fatwa, you can find the video online of Sheikh Abdurrahman al-Sudais telling people, make dua for Gaza, cry for added effect, but don't talk about Gaza. The point being is that despite getting a fatwa, despite having a statement from the UAE condemning the Palestinians, despite the control of CNN and BBC and these other outlets that were doing PR for Israel, and by that what I mean, I don't mean in an accusation way, I mean it objectively. When the Israelis bombed the Jabalia refugee camp and they killed 400 people, the IDF representative went on CNN and the presenter asked him what happened. And the IDF said, we bombed it. And the presenter says, but 400 people died. And the IDF says, we were targeting a Hamas commander. We're not sure that we got him, but 400 people died. It is what it is. The CNN presenter is so shocked, he forgets for 10 seconds to ask his next question. But the CNN editors get together and instead of saying, IDF admit to bombing the Jabalia refugee camp and killing 400 people, they write, blast kills 400 people. The New York Times, they felt CNN wasn't good enough. There's better PR than that. So they said explosion kills 400 Palestinians. BBC said Palestinian Londoner loses 40 family members. And somebody joked and said, let's send out a search party then and find where those 40 family members are so they can be reunited. The point here being is that despite all of that, they spent billions of dollars. When I did the Yaqeen podcast, Sheikh, when I went to watch it back because somebody made a joke about the teacup that I had at the end, they said very English, we drink tea, coffee is not the preferable thing. But in any case, on the start of the Yaqeen podcast was an IDF advert. When I searched Surah Taha by Surah Shuraim to make a bit of tuhur, the IDF advert came before the Quran started, as if the IDF was spending money to say even the Bismillah before the Quran starts. The point here being is they spent all that money, but why did they spend it? They spent it because they identified a threat that is manifesting itself, that is making life complicated. And on this first point where I finish is on this. I ask, so part of my job for those who don't know is I also advise diplomats and governments and the like on issues that are taking place. And I also consult with ambassadors whenever they're going out on a new posting. Don't judge me, you learn a lot from these interactions. In any case, I asked one of the diplomats, why did Macron call for a ceasefire? And I promise you, no word of a lie, the diplomat said, do you want the honest reason? I said, yeah. Explain to me how racist Macron became the first European leader to call for a ceasefire. They said Macron got sick and tired that every time he went into the presidential palace, the employees would say, Monsieur President, please ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. Then he'd go to Marseille and he'd hear people say, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. He'd go to Toulouse, he'd hear ceasefire, ceasefire. He'd go to Bordeaux, he'd go to Paris, he'd go to Calais. Everywhere he went, until one day, he entered, heard an employee say ceasefire, and he went, for God's sake, call the press, I'll give a statement. And he said, ceasefire, but Israel has the right to self-defense. And the media only focused on the ceasefire. When Netanyahu told him, why did you call for a ceasefire? The French arrogance kicked in. Macron couldn't go back on what he said, so he stuck to his guns and called for a ceasefire. The Belgian deputy prime minister called for sanctions on Israel. Spain said it's ready to recognize a Palestinian state. The Saudi Arabia lifted restrictions on dua for Gaza. So for those who don't know, my wife and I, we run a travel company. We believe in this idea of reconnecting the memories of the Ummah before the Ummah can be revived. But in any case, she went to present in the World Halal Summit in Istanbul. There was a Malaysian guy there who went to her and said, tell Sami that I'm going to Umrah in December and I've been told no kafirs, no free Gaza stickers, and don't record yourselves making dua for Gaza. I told Sumaya, I can't go on a rumor. Every time I do a video about what's happening, I get backlash from American imams for 1 month, and then apologies for the next month. And I'm not in the mood for a backlash. I don't have the tolerance for it at this moment in time. I'm not going based on a rumor. I went to LA. Beautiful, sunny, clear sky. 27 degrees Celsius, LA. I've never seen weather like that in winter. May Allah bless you. ويزيدكم inshallah. If you don't appreciate it, I come from a land where we get 5 days of summer and they don't even come at the same time. When I went in LA, I was at a dinner with some group and I said to them, I heard a rumor that if you go to Umrah, you can't do this. They said, Sheikh, it's not a rumor. They said, here is the WhatsApp message. I'm going to Umrah in December and this is what they're saying. Because of public pressure, when they arrested the Turkish guy in the first week and arrested the Algerian guy in the second week, they stopped arresting people over it because people started to know what was happening. The WhatsApp started to go viral, and so the government started worrying, and now you can wear your kafirs, even though they're encouraging people not to wear it. They're going after those who don't have protection, like those Bengalis, Pakistanis, Egyptians, Algerians, who work in Saudi Arabia, who aren't born and raised in the West, where you have countries of rule of law. They're going after what they term as the small fry. I don't term them small fry. I believe them to be, mashallah, honorable people. I'm saying for them, they're targeting who they believe to be weak, but ignoring those who might be loud. That pressure made that happen. But the point that I'm saying is that when the question is framed as our efforts haven't produced anything, I always respond and I say, why is it that Blinken and Netanyahu are spending billions to get you to be quiet while you are unable to appreciate why they want you to be quiet? What's the power they see in you that you don't see in yourself? What's the power that they are willing to spend billions to shut and to be quiet and to stop? What is that power that they fear you will manifest that you insist doesn't exist or you insist is not worth deploying? And that's why I always say that if you don't want to accept it from an objective point of view, then at least accept it in that they are willing to spend billions to silence you, even if you can't see the value of your voice. If they're willing to spend billions, yes, Sidi, keep talking loudly. But the second reason is a darker reason, ya Sheikh. The second reason is, in my opinion, the main reason why Biden has not yet called for a ceasefire. And it is that on the one hand, Biden is being told that the Muslims are angry. Biden is being told that the Muslims are going to punish him in November. Biden is being told that the Muslims will not forgive him for the genocide that has been taking place. At the same time, he's talking to Muslim leaders who are telling him we are ready to normalize. He's talking to Muslim leaders who are telling him that normalization is still on the table. He's talking to Muslim leaders who are saying we will never turn our back on the Abraham Accords. We're not going to kick out the Israeli ambassador. He's talking to leaders who are telling him that 20,000 Palestinians being killed in a genocide is not a red line for normalization. He's talking to leaders who are speaking to him and saying to him that Jared Kushner can come and give a keynote speech in the heart of Saudi Arabia 4 weeks into the genocide, and Jared Kushner can say in the heart of Saudi Arabia that October 7th was designed to ruin normalization. I've been told by the Saudis that the normalization process will not be ruined by these Palestinians. Biden is seeing that when Jared Kushner came back to America, he said, I felt safer with the Saudis who were telling me that we're ready to normalize, more safe there than I felt on US campuses who were using freedom of speech to hold me to account for genocide. The reality is Biden is confused because Biden says that Rashida Tlaib and these others are saying that the Muslims are angry, but he's saying, you're telling me Muslims are angry. The land of the two holy mosques is telling me it's fine. You're telling me Muslims are angry. The land of the two holy mosques, on the night that Israel began its ground offensive, went ahead with a Shakira concert. You're telling me Muslims are angry. Turki al-Sheikh, the head of the General Entertainment Authority, put on his Facebook post that I will not cancel any concerts for a political event. Even though he later cancelled it for the death of Emir al-Kuwait, Allah yarahmu, because he didn't want to risk a diplomatic crisis with Kuwait. He said, I don't want to offend the Kuwaitis, so I'll cancel the concerts. But the Gaza and Palestine, adi, no problem. And that's why Biden, instead of calling for a ceasefire, what he's done is, he sent out his representatives in America to find any masjid that will receive him, any masjid that will talk with him, any masjid that will speak with him. Blinken is gone to find any group of Muslims who will sit with him so he can lend him his ear, so he can get a photo opportunity like Justin Trudeau in Canada, where he met the Muslims and he takes a picture where they're shouting at him, but he's doing this as if he's a sage, wise leader who's listening to the Muslims. Unfortunately, and it breaks my heart to say this, Blinken today met with a group of Muslims. Blinken found his audience. Blinken sat with a group of Muslims and he allowed them to pour their hearts out. And according to the reports coming out, Blinken did not show any sympathy. He repeated the same arguments that he's been saying publicly, which is Israel has the right to self-defense, and until we have a solution to protect its security, I'm afraid I can't go ahead with it. So when you ask why is there not a ceasefire, it's not necessarily because the Ummah doesn't have power, but because the Ummah is mobilizing, but there are a minority group within the Ummah reassuring Biden that he doesn't need to call for a ceasefire. There are a minority within the Ummah who are telling Biden that all is not lost in November. Because after Blinken's meeting today, and it pains my heart to say it, it really pains my heart, Blinken is going to go back to the White House and say that these Muslims will truly forget by November. Because if they can sit with me even after I massacred 20,000 of their Palestinians, if they still believe there is a Sha'rat Muawiyah, for those who don't know Sha'rat Muawiyah, it's an Arabic saying. Muawiyah, who was a Khalifa of the Muslimin, Muawiyah said that if me and my brother are fighting and all that's left between us is a hair and we're both pulling on that hair, if he pulls, I will no longer pull in order to make sure I have at least one avenue to reconcile with him. Blinken is going to go back and say we have more than Sha'rat Muawiyah with these Muslims. Let Israel give them a window, extend the window for genocide, because we will still have months where we'll be able to engage with them, because the Muslims don't want to go towards Trump. They're more scared of Trump and the Muslim ban. We will have a good 3-4 months to convince the Muslims to be wise, to be calm, to think about their interests instead of punishing the genocide. So to answer your question simply, there are 2 reasons. The Ummah is making Blinken buckle. It's making Biden buckle. They are hesitating. They're spending billions to push back against an Ummah that has permanently shifted public opinion and resulted in a series of events that has led to Israel now standing trial for genocide. If you had told me, Sheikh, 5 months ago that Israel would stand for genocide on trial in an international court within our lifetimes, I would have laughed at you. Israel now, the ICJ, not only that a US court in Oakland ruled that there is a plausible case for genocide against the Israelis. The point is the Ummah is making progress. The Ummah is making them buckle. The Ummah is forcing a shift. France has dissented from the US. Australia refused to join the Red Sea Alliance. Spain refused to join the Red Sea Alliance. France has called for a ceasefire. The European Union, Eli Cohen went to the European Union and he said to them, I have an idea to solve the Palestine issue. Here's an artificial island we will create and we'll send the Palestinians there. Eli Cohen was horrified that the 27 member states were horrified. The 27 member states were so shocked that Joseph Borrell came out and said, we are going to pursue consequences for Israel for trying to ruin the two-state solution. And Eli Cohen said, I don't understand, what are you guys so angry about? The point is, public opinion has shifted. And I'll finish on this particular point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about the ayat related to da'wah. He says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّا دَعَ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Is there any better speech than one who calls to Allah, does good deeds, and say, I am from the Muslimin? But sometimes when we quote the ayah, if we don't read the ayah afterwards, we will assume that the first ayah is all about friendly neighbor, take a couscous to your neighbor, and give them a Quran, very friendly environments. The next ayah tells you what da'wah feels like. Where Allah says, وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ. The good deed and the bad deed are not equal. So when you give da'wah and you're met with a backlash, don't respond with their tactics, for their bad deeds are not equal to your good deeds. And Allah says, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Idfa' here has two meanings. Idfa' means conduct yourself in that which is best, and it also means push back with that which is best. When the Arabs, they say, idfa' al-bab, push the door. idfa' billati ahsan. فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. For the one with whom you have an enmity with today. And where does the enmity in this context come? From your da'wah. Remember, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, for 40 years of his life, he doesn't suffer persecution from Quraysh. He's loved. They call him Sadiq, Amin. When does he suffer the persecution? When he stands up and demands that society changes, but with La ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah, and demands justice. That's when they persecute him for 23 years. So the enemy here is the one who responds to your da'wah negatively. The response to your call for justice for Palestine negatively. The ones who try to silence your voices, who spend the billions, who lambast you, who deride you on social media. Allah says, the one with whom you have enmity, tomorrow becomes your warmest ally. Ibadallah, did you all see that girl in the beginning of the genocide, where she went on TikTok, ya Sheikh? I don't know if you've seen it, it's amazing. She says, I'm seeing these videos of these Palestinians, how even though they're being killed, they're saying, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. They're saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. They're saying, we will continue to resist. They are saying, Allah is the one. She said on a TikTok, I want to know where they get their resilience from. And her conclusion was, it comes from the Quran. So she says, I'm going to do 1 hour every day live and go through one page of the Quran each day. Within 2 weeks, she went live with a hijab and said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. There was a girl in LA, Los Angeles, beautiful, clear skies, sunny, 27 degrees Celsius in November, LA. I told myself when I came off the plane and I saw it, I said, Allahumma, I will never spend winter anywhere else. A girl in LA, she did a TikTok. She said, I am Zionist and I grew up in a Zionist environment and I lived my whole life as a Zionist, never having heard the Palestinian voices. But as a result of TikTok, حَفَظَهَا اللَّهُ وَرَعَاهَا وَرَفَعَ مَقْ. She didn't say that part, I said it. But may Allah preserve it, because otherwise we'd be left with CNN and BBC. She said, as a result of TikTok and as a result of the algorithm that was smashed by billions of the ummah, retweeting and sharing hashtag Palestine, because you all know how algorithms work. It only promotes what's popular. When billions are sharing the same content, the first, second, third, fourth video is all Palestine. She said, as a result of TikTok, I finally heard Palestinian voices. I can't unsee what I've seen. I'm now dedicating my TikTok every single day to expose what Israel is doing. Allah says, فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. But Allah also tells you, and this is the real answer to your question, ya Shaykh, that you pose, that many people are posing here. وَمَا يُلَقَاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا. The ones who achieve this are the ones who are patient. And Allah here tells you what patience is. Patience is not the idea of sitting and waiting for something. Patience and perseverance with a process where you are frustrated, it's not producing the outcome you want. But if you continue, it will produce the outcome you need. That if you are patient with that process and you keep going, right now you've made Biden and Netanyahu fall out with each other. If you notice, Netanyahu 2 weeks ago came out and said, I reject a two-state solution, and this is not the time for elections. The reason he said that is because Blinken met with Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid on his last visit to Tel Aviv, and the Netanyahu is worried that Blinken is trying to get them to push for elections to get rid of Netanyahu, because they all believe Netanyahu is the only reason this war is continuing. You can see that you think their hearts are united, but قُلُوبُهُمْ شَتَّى. But the reason قُلُوبُهُمْ شَتَّى, the reason the hearts are divided, is because an environment is being created that is making it very difficult for them to continue in the genocide in the way that they want. And that's because an ummah that believes itself to be weak is manifesting power and refuses to be quiet. And this is why, and I promise this is where I end, ya Sheikh, but this is why, to answer your question directly, there are two reasons. The first reason is that Muslims fail to appreciate the gains that they had. Muslims will read the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will finish it and they will tell the halaqah that look how Allah made the Prophet ﷺ go through the persecution of 13 years, victory at Badr, defeat in Uhud, existential crisis in Khandaq, Treaty of Hudaybiyah that Umar bin Khattab considered a humiliation, and then Fatah Mecca. We will teach in the halaqah that the process is difficult, but when we find our process difficult, we tell ourselves we're not making any gains. No one says that Uhud wasn't a gain. No one says Khandaq wasn't a gain. No one says Hudaybiyah wasn't a gain. There's all gains, it's all in the process. I think that if Muslims altered the perspective slightly, I think they will see that it wasn't Muslim leaders that brought about this shift in the world that led to Israel being put on trial for genocide and led to Blinken and Biden falling in the polls, and now the Democrats desperately scrambling because they're terrified they're going to lose the elections. It wasn't Muslim leaders, it wasn't CNN, it wasn't BBC, it was a Muslim ummah, billions, who raised the voice of the Palestinians, who made those who were Zionists yesterday become Palestinians, who shifted that public opinion where non-Muslims today, even non-Muslims, are saying that I will not reward Genocide Joe with a second term, even if it brings the racist orange man in power. They are doing that because they heard the da'wah, and yesterday they were enemies. Today they are becoming our warmest allies. Walillah alhamd. I celebrate those victories because I know Allah has already dedicated the outcome. And when I see those diplomats panicking, when I see them fall over themselves, when I sit with companies who are telling me they are concerned about the shift in public opinion, I hear that, I go to my ummah, and this is why I came to America and I keep going round. You said, Sheikh, I've been here for 3 months. I've only been in London 10 days in the past 3 months. When people tell me, why are you still here? I tell them because what I am more terrified of more than anything else is that I fear Blinken believes in the power of Allah more than Muslims do. Blinken fears the power of the ummah, so he spends millions to silence them. Netanyahu fears the power of the ummah, so he meets with TikTok influencers and pays them millions to push their narrative. They fear the power of an ummah that doesn't appreciate the power it has, that is making everybody fear. The ummah has never actually been weak. It's always been the ummah has never actually met the conditions to manifest that power. And I think the first stage of doing it is to appreciate that we need to be patient with the process that is resulting in outcomes that we need to appreciate, that Allah will then amplify. Because to put it bluntly, the Israelis themselves are saying that if the war ends tomorrow, the world won't say Palestine was defeated. The world will say that Israel went from being a haven for genocide victims to being a haven for genocide maniacs. That Israel, in the words of a Zionist journalist in The Hill, he wrote in the article at the end, he said, what I fear is that while Netanyahu may win the military war, he has damaged Israel's standing so much that, quote, our allies will no longer rush to our rescue in future because they won't want to be seen associated with genocide. Ibadallah, we are winning if only you could see it. Allahu Akbar.
Jazakallah khair. Hassanin, we do have, I want to make sure that inshallah, for those who have questions, they can also inshallah ask questions. And like just a reminder, please keep your question as precise as possible and as short as possible pertaining to the topic of tonight, inshallah.
Jazakallahu khairan. Welcome to the South.
Allah jazik, barakallahu feek.
Mashallah. We appreciate your effort. How can we make these efforts more effective? Can you give 1, 2, 3 points, especially to people in this young people, organizations? Can you please, in your experience, give 1, 2, 3, 4 points to make these efforts effective and how to organize and how to do this? Jazakallah khair.
Allah barak feek, barakallahu feek. The first thing is, first let's appreciate that Biden is worried. He's worried what? That Muslims will punish him. The Democrats are worried that Muslims will punish them, which means they've identified a power that Muslim voters have that I believe Muslims need to appreciate. If you haven't registered to vote, may Allah forgive you, because I cannot understand how they fear a power that you haven't even equipped yourself with first. The second point, there are primaries that are coming up. Find out those who supported ceasefire, find out those who didn't support ceasefire, and see if you can organize not to deliver somebody who supported ceasefire, but to punish the one who didn't support a ceasefire. We are becoming an ummah for the first time that will have the ability to punish. Some people will say, no, we can think bigger than that. I don't think we're in a position to deliver candidates. We're in a position to punish a candidate. If you find two candidates in a local area for the Congress or for the State Assembly, one supported ceasefire, one didn't support ceasefire, go and support the one who supported the ceasefire, just to let them know that the reason they lost is because they supported genocide, and because they supported genocide, their political career was finished. Go and manifest the power that Biden fears you will use. That's one tactic. The second thing that's worth noting, if social media has made the difference, then keep going on social media. But not only that, Ibadallah, there is a sense sometimes, and maybe I'm guilty of amplifying it, to believe that we are isolated as an ummah. When I say the ummah made a difference, I mean the ummah was first to respond to Palestine, but because the ummah responded, we have non-Muslims now who are standing with Palestine, who only yesterday they were standing with the Zionists. If we now see that we are able to shift American public opinion, non-Muslim public opinion, then let us channel the story of Mus'ab ibn Umayr radiyallahu ta'ala an, and go out to these non-Muslim environments and convince them that genocide needs to be punished. Some of you will think, how? I sat with a few students and one of them came with a really good idea. He said, look, at the end of the day, when you notice in the Republican Party, there is a schism. When you hear some Republicans say, why are we spending money abroad on wars that never bring benefit for the Americans? There is nothing stopping Muslims going to their local communities and saying, guys, you don't have to be Muslim. One, it's a genocide. And two, we spent billions on Vietnam, billions on Iraq, billions on Afghanistan. And now we're spending billions on Israel. We didn't get anything from Vietnam. We didn't get anything from Iraq. We didn't get anything from Afghanistan. When do we learn that all these billions of dollars that we're spending is not bringing benefit? And to emphasize this point, when I came to LA the first time in November last year, of course it's my first time. I'm in a place where I've seen in the movies. And everybody talks like the movies. You know, it's fascinating for me. There are times when Americans will talk to me and I'll zone out mid-conversation. Because in my mind, they're talking, I think, Allahu Akbar, they actually talk like they do in the movies. They actually say, you know, like, hey, y'all, how you doing? You know, and you know, hey, how are you? I went to LA in the morning to go to a cafe, 6:30 after Fajr, and there are these people jogging in their yoga outfits. And I'm walking, minding my own business, dressed in a heavy jacket because London, you know, habits, even though it's sunny and warm. I didn't want to believe it. I was like, I can't, something's not right here. And then as I'm walking by, they're running past me and they say, hey, good morning, how are you? And I went, Allah, why are you so happy so early in the morning? SubhanAllah. Where's the misery that we see on the London Underground, you know? The point I'm saying is, I wanted to see some of the sights. So I went to Beverly Hills, yeah, Sheikh, because I watched Beverly Hills Cop when I was growing up, Eddie Murphy and these things. When I got to Beverly Hills, they told me it's a rich area. But when I turned up, I just saw rows of tents with homeless people in them. Not only that, I saw a whole full like parking lot full of tents just with homeless people. You're spending billions on wars abroad instead of spending it on your homelessness. When I came to America first time, 2018, I came for a wedding, Sheikh. Now, I want to tell you something that I know you won't believe because you've never tasted it. But thanks to His Majesty's government, in the United Kingdom, it's something we enjoy. If I wake up one morning and I go, that felt a bit chesty, Sumaya, my wife, Sumaya. She says, really? I said, yeah. She said, are you sure you're okay? I said, لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي, for my heart to be easy. I know you guys won't believe this, but this is actually what we do. We dial the doctor. Doctor, how are you? What's wrong with you? Doctor, I coughed. So what? It feels chesty. So what do you want? Doctor, I need to see you. I don't have an appointment for another week or so. Doctor, I've got an opening at 10:30 on the Friday in 3 days. Okay, doctor, yeah, I'll come and see you. I haven't paid a penny yet. I go to the doctor, Sheikh. And he tells me, what's wrong with you? I tell him, listen, doctor. He says, there's nothing wrong with you. Doctor, I asked Sheikh Google. I might have cancer. He tells me, Yakhi, stop with your nonsense. You don't have anything, get out. And I go and I say, Alhamdulillah for my peace of mind. And I know you Americans are horrified. I know you don't believe it, but it's true. When I went to North Carolina for a wedding, there was a brother in the car, American, who vomited. And when he vomited, as we do in the United Kingdom, Akhi, liyatma'anna qalbak. So your heart might be easy, go see a doctor. He went, no! The suggestion was so horrible, he vomited again. He did vomit again, but not because of the suggestion. And we said to him, and then one doctor next to us said, Akhi, just in case, it could be meningitis. I said, what's meningitis? Google, meningitis. Oh, that looks horrible. The third time, I said, listen, you know what? We got 9 of this. No, don't! Do you know how much it costs to get an ambulance here? I told Akhi, you're stingy over $100. He goes, what, $100? He goes, it's way more expensive than $100. Biden wanted $14 billion to help the genocide and ethnic cleansing instead of providing healthcare for you. You ask me what actions can you take? Go and tell the Americans and put the reality before them. If public opinion is changing because they're seeing the reality of Palestine and Israel because of what you're sharing, it means they don't know the realities of what's happening. Now, given that public opinion is shifting, why don't we increase that momentum? Now let's go out. Let's change our messaging on social media. Let's amplify the voice of the Palestinians. But if you've got any tech guys or videographers over here, or any script writers, or those of you who are good at creating the content for social media, do these things where you show those figures. I saw in Chicago, they put up billboards, 3.8 billion to Israel when I can't afford healthcare. This language matters. It's about وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Debate with them with that which is best. You ask me about tangible events. Start with this and you will see how the ball rolls. And the third initiative, which is a bit more broader than this, is this. Ibadallah, Gaza made us realize the ummah is powerful, but it also showed we have holes in our community. If I told you, give me a list of 10 people you would send to CNN, BBC tomorrow to represent the community, you would struggle to come up with 10 names. The Zionist has 200. Ibadallah, I've seen you in America, mashallah. I've seen your houses. I've seen your roads. I've seen your cars. Bismillah. Allah yazidkum, inshallah. When I went back to London for those 10 days after I came to LA, I walked in. My wife, she said, Sami, welcome home. And I went. She said, what's wrong with you? I told her, Sumaya, I feel claustrophobic. If you saw what I saw, London doesn't look the same again. Our roads are narrow. I can't stand it. SubhanAllah. The point being is you have resources to train a generation that is ready to learn these things. You can pool your resources for it. 4, if your area isn't a swing state where you can make a difference. Somebody told me that Tennessee is not an area where you can make a difference. There's nothing stopping you pooling your money together and sending a team to Michigan and Arizona and these places to help those communities over there. You have the money for it to send them there full boarding for 2 weeks, 3 weeks to go and help them. There are many innovative ways that you can amplify this wave. But in order to appreciate those, understand, you change public opinion. If the Muslims alone may have the deciding vote if the election is tight. But the real difference that will be made is the Muslims who convince the non-Muslims to punish Genocide Joe, even if they don't like Donald Trump. I'm not saying vote Donald Trump. What I'm saying is, if non-Muslims are now changing their mind, if Kamala Harris's own daughter is raising money for Palestine, if the polls are saying that now non-Muslim Americans 35 years and under are no longer pro-Zionist, they are now pro-Palestine, it shows you your da'wah is having an impact. Da'wah is not just calling people to shahadat la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Da'wah is calling to justice because that's synonymous with la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And the proof is that girl who heard about Palestine, opened the Quran and became Muslim. It was the call for justice that opened her heart to Islam. Now you're on a roll. The momentum is in your favor. Americans are changing their minds. Not even CNN and BBC are able to maintain their control over the information. No matter how much fake news they push, more and more Americans are turning away from Zionists. If I am a general in the battlefield and I'm seeing that this unit is having such an impact, I will say, Ibadallah, go and reinforce it. Go and amplify the message. Go and talk. If 100 people are converting today, 1,000 10,000 people will convert with a coordinated effort. We made the difference without even coordinating. Imagine what you could achieve with coordination. And that's why it could be anything. It could be dinners, it could be iftars, it could be gathering people to gatherings, it could be a video. You can do anything because it all makes a difference. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. He who does even a good, I know you have gender issues here in America. Those who do good deeds, an atom of good deed, Allah sees it. The reason Allah said this is to make it so you never underappreciate even the most basic effort. Because my opinion, and I finish on this point, my opinion is this: our voices alone did not make the difference. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Hadith Qudusi that if my servant takes one step towards me, I take 10. If he comes to me walking, I come to him running. We chose to mobilize for Gaza. Allah amplified our voices. Allah opened those hearts. If we keep moving, Allah will keep opening that road. And ya ibadallah, for those who are saying Sami sounds too optimist in the middle of a genocide, ibadallah, I'm trying to use the powers Allah has given me. If I had an army, I would do something. If I had oil to cut off, I would do it. But I refuse to be somebody who does nothing. I refuse to allow the ummah to do nothing. Ibadallah, let's use the powers that we have. If we can't stop the genocide, then at least we can make sure that we set a precedent that any US president that commits a genocide will never have a second term. Why? Because the Muslims will mobilize politically and they will show a power they've never shown before, which is to punish candidates. And remember, for those who say, what do you mean punish? What makes the Zionist lobby so strong? What makes the Black Caucus lobby so strong? It's not their ability to deliver candidates. If it was only to deliver candidates, then the candidate would win and then betray them. The reason they don't betray them is because they have another ability that Muslims have never demonstrated, which is the ability to punish. The ability to punish the congressperson. This is the first time Muslims are in a position where they can punish a sitting US president. And ya ibadallah, let me tell you, imagine if a sitting US president is toppled. Right now when the congressperson comes, they don't research the Muslim community before they come. What they do is, they sit in the car. It's often the imam who's gone to them and said, please come visit us. And then they'll sit in the car, they'll ask the secretary, give me something that will make the Muslims go wow. So the secretary goes, what will make Muslims go wow? And then he will say, they have a saying, it's assam maikum. Then the congressperson will stand, he'll be like, hello everybody, assam maikum. And then everybody will be like, oh mashallah, it's actually assalamu alaikum, but thank you for trying. And he'll be like, all right, and Mubarak Eid. It's actually Eid Mubarak, but thank you for trying. If Muslims were the reason why a sitting US president was toppled because they punish him for genocide, I think, wallahu a'lam, only Allah knows the ghaib, I think that next year, if Sheikh Muhammad al-Faqih invites me again, inshallah, and Sheikh Yasir, I think that when you're praying Taraweeh here in Ramadan, don't be surprised if the congressperson comes in and just tries it out and prays you at the back. I wouldn't be surprised if the congressperson comes to you next year and he stands here and he says, Muslim community, assalamu alaikum. He says it properly this time. And he says, we need to stand together, we need to work together. And you know, at the end of the day, it's going to be tough. But as the Prophet Muhammad said, innamal a'malu binniyati. And we got to stick together. And I know it may be tough. But as the Prophet Muhammad said, innamal usri yusra. Why? Because he will know that Muslims are a community that know how to punish. That the Muslims went in the local areas in Tennessee. They didn't put forward candidates. What they did was they went and they saw one candidate was pro-ceasefire, one candidate was against. They said, you know what, I don't care who represents me, I'm going to punish the one who supported the genocide, and the whole community goes and they go and vote for him. The Algerians say, Skarafi, just listen, you wanted to punish, we're going to suffer together, Habibi, ta'ala. Like there's no way I'm letting you win on that. So you ask what to do, the reality is there's so much you can do. But in order to see those opportunities, you need to appreciate what you achieved. Wallahi, I believe it wholeheartedly. The ummah roared and it shook the world. And many people are hearing the truth for the first time. People are entering the deen and changing their opinions. Momentum is in our favor. This isn't the time to say, oh, why are our efforts not making an impact? This is the time to say we're getting closer. We're causing unprecedented shifts. We're causing permanent changes. And remember, why did South Africa apartheid fall? It's because when public opinion shifted, Margaret Thatcher could no longer resist the nations that imposed the sanctions. Algeria, we always say Algerian liberation movement kicked out the French from Algeria. But in the 1950s, there was also a collapse of the colonial system around the world. America was rising as a superpower and was happy to see France fail. The British were happy to see France fail. The Italians were happy to see France fail. They were essentially divided between themselves, and that created an environment conducive for the Americans to recognize Algerian independence to spite the French. The world is shifting. All the dynamics are shifting. Allah in His hikmah decides how this process goes. We recognize Allah knows the best way. We don't tell Allah what we think the outcome should be. We say, Ya Allah, we know you've decided the outcome. We beg you to use us as the vehicles to deliver it, inshallah.
I want to make sure that, Hassanin, I want to make sure that also our sisters have the opportunity to ask a question.
Yes, what we did,
if they want to, inshallah.
Yeah, so there's a section down here for the sisters, and we will be able to, if you move forward, we can bring a microphone to you. We actually have 2 questions from the sisters on the phone as well. So we're going to do 3 questions at the same time.
Inshallah. I promise I'll be brief. It's my fault. I'm sorry.
So we'll ask 3 questions at the same time, and then we'll just get your feedback. So brother, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So today, U.S. dropped bomb in Iraq and Syria. Given what's going on in Palestine, the whole region, are we at the brink of something really big and bad?
I'm just taking a note of it. Iran and the deal with the Americans to bomb areas without causing casualties. Iran, US. Okay, yeah, next.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is, with all this situation, you have a very close eye on it. How long do you think it's going to continue? And you think if Donald Trump would have been president, it would not have happened?
How long will it last?
And this question comes from upstairs from the sister section. Is it possible to have an independent candidate for next election that we endorse to show politicians how many votes we are able to get? That's from the sister section.
Bismillah, briefly. Iran and the US have a deal and an agreement whenever their flare-ups take place. No one wants war, no one wants regional war, no one wants world war, and they're very careful. Iranians do not believe they can go head-to-head with the US and will take every step to make sure that they don't provoke the US into a full-on war. Likewise, Biden does not want a full-out war in the region so close to the elections because it's something that will punch him in the elections. What happened was the militia, pro-Iran militia, killed 3 American soldiers, and the Americans are not sure if it was intentional from Iran or not, which is why Biden said Iran supplied the weapons, but we don't know if the Iranians did it. I'm blaming the Iranians based on the weapons. Because it became prominent news, the Americans need to King Kong to show. So they told the Iraqi government that these are the 85 areas we are going to bomb. The Iraqi government, which is under the complete control of the Iranian proxies of Hashd al-Sha'bi of 23 militias, told the Iranians, these are the 85 areas. The Iranians, they said, okay, leaders who are in these 85 areas, I need you to leave for a couple of days so the Americans can come in and bomb. So Biden can say we're taking tough measures to get the Republicans to be quiet, because the Republicans are saying, we want war, we want war, we want war. We need to show a show of force, which is why the Americans are saying we're bombing, but we don't want a world war. The same way that when Trump killed Qasem Soleimani in 2019, Trump didn't want to do it. What happened was the Iranians were pressuring the Americans. Some militias went overboard. An American contractor was killed. Then the militias, they raided the US embassy in broad daylight. Trump said, La habibi, this is too much. You're doing this to me. You're going to embarrass me in front of the Americans. He went and killed Qasem Soleimani. The Iranians, they said, oh, we can't really go to war with the Americans. But yeah, see Trump, we need to show we're not going to just take this lying down. So they told the Americans, we're going to send missiles on the Ain al-Asad base. Trump said, Tawakkal Allah, not Tawakkal Allah, but he told them, go for it. American troops, they withdrew from Ain al-Asad. Iran shot missile, barrage, Iran and mashallah power, and then it toned down. I think that what's happening is, it doesn't mean that there won't be a risk of a world war. Because remember, World War I was an accident. It was Franz Ferdinand getting assassinated in Sarajevo and just escalated. World War accident in that Hitler believed, the way the Israelis are believing, that Hitler believed if he invaded Poland, they wouldn't come to its rescue over a piece of paper, the same way he believes that if they enter Gaza, no one's going to do anything about it. Now it looks like the world is starting to do something about it. So I think with Iran, it doesn't mean Iran and the Americans are working with each other. It means that Iran and America agree that they don't want the worst case scenario. So they're saber rattling with each other, but saying, look, do it my way. No, do it my way. No, do it but making careful that the fire doesn't spread too much. And that's why I actually argue that the reason Israel began its ground offensive is that if you remember, Israel delayed its ground offensive because it was concerned what would the Iranian reaction be. The interesting thing about the ground offensive is it began 3 days after Haniya, the head of the Hamas Politburo, Hummus Politburo, the head of the Hummus Politburo went to Iran to speak with Khamenei. I'm doing it because of the algorithm, because if they detect anything except hummus, they might, So, it is what it is. I was called Palestine watermelon next time. In any case, when Haniya went to Tehran, and Reuters reported that it got leaked, that he asked Khamenei and said, we need you to up the support for us. And Khamenei said to him, you didn't consult us before you did this. This is the maximum we're going to do, which is just to a bit of show of force here and there. I believe the Houthis are acting semi-independently, that the Houthis are not as much of a proxy as the Iraqi militias are. But when Israel found out about that meeting, they began their ground offensive. So to answer your question simply, I think Iran and the US, it's skirmishes in the hope it doesn't escalate further. The last question in terms of, second question, how long will it last? Only Allah knows. I actually think that it's more likely to be phased out rather than permanent ceasefire. Because permanent ceasefire means that you recognize Hamas as the leaders of Gaza. But if you phase out, then you have a state of war without war. You have a state of war that doesn't require you to acknowledge the other party. But you also have no genocide, which means you have time to win back the Muslim vote by telling them that if Trump wins, you won't get to see your relatives. And which is worse, not seeing your relatives or genocide? Come on. You can forgive a genocide so you can see Ammu and Khaltu so they can come to America because you're too lazy to go visit them in their countries instead. Or maybe because, you're too scared you won't see Sami for 4 years. But yeah, Ibadallah, I promise I'll come back after 4 years. If the issue is me, don't think about me, please. The point being is that I think it will be phased out gradually, but only Allah knows the ghaib. Why? It's important to remember that these Israelis, they don't believe in any law or any order or the like. They believe that they can act with impunity. And this is why I mentioned earlier about why hasn't Biden called for a ceasefire? Because Biden believes there's hope he can win back the Muslim vote. The moment Biden is certain he won't win back the Muslim vote, that's when Biden will tell Netanyahu, Sarah, this is too much now, you need to go. Because they're feeling the pressure. The Americans are pressuring the Israelis. But Biden wants to do it in a way that won't make him lose the Zionist vote because he believes the Muslims are disorganized. Which leads me to the third question about the independent candidate. The reality is that there are some areas where you might want to put an independent candidate. Sure, that's perfectly fine. But the reason why I'm asking you to think about it in the bigger picture is what's your aim in these elections? Is your aim to deliver representatives, which is very difficult to do on your own? Or is your aim to punish those who supported genocide? If your aim is to punish those who supported genocide so that people take you seriously, you don't need to put up independent candidates. You just need to analyze who is running where and find those who didn't support the genocide and go and support those candidates. There are some areas where you will have a sizable concentration of Muslim community where you might be able to put up an independent candidate. That's how you guys decide to innovate. It's up to you. It's your business. In the UK, for example, in London, we have a constituency called Redbridge in East London. We call it the Shadowlands. Astaghfirullah. In any case, all the good restaurants are there, by the way. I will say that, and I acknowledge that. East London Mosque is also there. There is an area called Redbridge where the Muslims were divided about what we should do about the sitting MP. The MP only has a 5,000 vote majority. There are about 20,000 Muslims in that constituency. So the Muslim leaders were saying, Ya ibadallah, let's move. Problem is, and you're not like them at all, Sheikh Yasser, neither is Sheikh Muhammad al-Faqih. Imams are very stubborn in terms of moving. And in London, they can be quite territorial. So it was difficult to get a coordinated effort to move. So one masjid decided, you know what? Forget it. Nahna, we will take the lead on this. They put an announcement where they were going to do a hustings. So 200 people turned up and they said, which one of you wants to be the candidate for the next election to challenge West Streeting? 3 people came and they spent 3 hours and a half debating and deciding who should be the candidate. In the end, they decided on a Palestinian activist called Layan Muhammad. When they announced this group, the Redbridge Community Action Group, when they announced that they had agreed on Layan, the community stopped bickering and said, you know what? Yalla bismillah. Yalla, let's all get behind Layan. And West Streeting 2 days later went on Sky News and 180 changed his language because he's sweating. Because he knows that 5,000 is, even if Layan doesn't win, if the Muslims don't vote for him, he will lose his seat. And that's the point in terms of your attitude moving forward. Be wise. What is your aim? Is your aim to punish for genocide or to deliver a representative? If you can deliver a representative, great, go. If you cannot, do like Khalid ibn al-Walid. Khalid ibn al-Walid, when he first took the lead, when he turns up on the battlefield for the Muslims, I think it's the Battle of Yarmouk, but I might be wrong. He ties, the Persians are overwhelming the Muslims. So he ties brooms to the tails of the horses and he makes them run up and down to create dust, to give the impression there's a big army, and the Persians, they withdraw. The reason I'm telling you this story is Khalid ibn Walid defeated the Persians not by fighting them outright, but by creating an image and the deception and the picture. The picture we are trying to create, if we can't fight them head on, then let's create the picture that Muslims know how to punish. They know how to organize to punish. The Muslims might not have the numbers, but they know how to jump on the numbers of those who support the candidates that supported a ceasefire. So when you're organizing, I don't know what's the best way to do it because I don't know Memphis very well, but Ahlu Makkah adra bi-shi'abiha, the people of Mecca know their affairs best. You know the areas where you can make a difference. But the main thing is, ya ibadallah, move. Move, ya ibadallah. Move, don't be an ummah that's silent. Move, don't be an ummah that does nothing. Move, don't be an ummah that gives up. Be an ummah that if you stumble on a strategy, get back up and try again. If you make a mistake, get back up and try again. Because I always argue that the greatest magnificence of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not in the material achievements he achieved, albeit they were significant in taking Mecca and Medina. But what if I was to say to you that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not see Quds liberated? He did not live to see Islam being given in da'wah in the English language. He did not see what I saw, which is to take a plane on a 787 over the Atlantic, shaking in the air where you say your shahada 20 times, flying over that. You get to New York, but you still have 5 hours and a half before you get to this west coast, which I believe to be the ends of the earth. I believe if the earth was flat, that would be where the ends would be and you'd fall off. The Prophet ﷺ did not see a Muslim community at the ends of the earth that love him without seeing him, and they say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. But that doesn't take away from his magnificence, because his magnificence was not entirely the material achievements. It was the spirit he left behind in this ummah and the message, which made this ummah, when it went to Constantinople, it made attempt after attempt after attempt, because it was so convinced by Allah's promise. They knew it was going to come about, and they were desperate to be the vehicle for it. And that's what the ummah is like. Ibadallah, the strategy used, the first one might fail, the second might fail, the third might fail, but Allah will reward you on the fourth, fifth, sixth, because Allah rewards an ummah that strives, because He said, وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَ لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. That those who strive for the sake of Allah, and they believe in Allah, meaning they strive, believing Allah has the outcome, so they're striving on the basis, not that they believe they know the outcome, but they want to be part of Allah's outcome. Allah doesn't say their outcome is rewarded. He says their striving is rewarded. Because Allah is saying, Allah is saying that Allah monopolizes the outcome. Your honor is in being the vehicle. You might not see in your lifetime, that doesn't mean it's not coming. So keep innovating in this, keep more as a strategy, and bi'idhnillah, you will make the difference. And I will be in London, inshallah, in November. And when I receive the news that Genocide Joe has been punished, and the world says it's because of the Muslim vote, I will tell my London Muslims, guys, do not look down on these American Muslims. They turned out to be better than us. Barakallahu feekum.
Next couple of questions, please.
Assalamu alaikum. I want to ask you about two projects. One was planned in 1960s, and this is an Israeli project, which is Ben Gurion Canal. Okay, and this project, as you know, it may take up to 252 nuclear bombs to be hit to make that project happen. Do you think what's happening in Gaza right now, since Gaza location is right blocking that Ben Gurion Canal, it's blocking their project to the final destination. It's way easier if you look at the roadmap for that canal to go straight to the Mediterranean through Gaza, which is northern to the center of Gaza. Do you think this was an attempt that they rejected all the ceasefire to test the water of the Arab, the Muslim world, if they could take over Gaza and just demolish the whole thing, do it as a parking lot, like they said, to implement their dream 1960 project of the Ben Gurion Canal? That's number one. Number two, I don't know if it's related or not, but it is, I think, which is a Saudi Arabia project. It's the NEOM project. This one is already implemented. It's already been going on for years. And I've heard that's going to be the big deal for Israeli people. So thank you so much.
To answer these,
And just some sisters' questions. I'm going to quickly go through them. In the South, evangelical Christians believing in rapture are pro-Israeli. Any recommendations on how to talk to evangelical Christians? Second one from sisters is, how do we combat against organizations like AIPAC? What legal rights do Muslims have that are being silenced for speaking up at the workplace?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To answer briefly. Go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, brother, go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
One tactic that has been very successful in the past in US and even in UK is to sucker the Muslims into acts of violence that will then incite a very angry reaction against the Muslims in the general community. They find people with low IQ and they are induced to engage in some violent act. I think Imam Yasser has witnessed it up close in California. So I don't hear any realization of this danger. Now that the opinion seems to be changing towards the Muslims or in favor of Muslims, isn't there a great danger of that game being played again? And what are the preventive measures?
In terms of the Ben Gurion, sorry. I was not supposed. Go ahead, sorry.
We're going to give it a short, please. Sure.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair for your So my question is, as an analyst, what's your analysis of the main reasons why much of the leadership and governments of Arab and Muslim countries in general, especially those with extreme amounts of economic power, are at best, or let's say seemingly unwilling or unable to exert sufficient amounts of pressure on Israel to ease the plight of the Palestinians and bring about true justice, if you're able to answer. Thanks.
No, it's fine. It's a heartbreaking question. Like I hate answering it. In terms of the Ben Gurion, it's a good question though. In terms of the Ben Gurion Canal, I actually don't think Gaza was the war started because of it. I actually think that Netanyahu had the full support of the UAE, which was already ready to invest in the Ben Gurion Canal. And not only that, the Saudis were telling the Israelis that they could bring the Palestinians on board. If you remember, the Saudi Crown Prince gave an interview to Fox News about 2 weeks before October 7th, in which he said that we can't normalize without a pathway to a Palestinian state. This is very significant, the change in language. Reuters reported that Saudis had told the Americans that if the Americans give the Saudis a NATO-style security agreement, nuclear technology to build a weapon, and support for Vision 2030, then the Saudis would not insist on a Palestinian state. And the Israelis wanted the Saudis to prove they could bring the Palestinians on board. So bin Salman invited this Palestinian Authority to Riyadh and promised them, economic package and the deal, and then sent a Saudi ambassador to Ramallah to say that, they are on board, that Saudi is about to normalize, and Ramallah is getting ready to celebrate it in exchange for this economic package. The Palestinians knew they were about to be stabbed in the back, which is why when the Saudi ambassador wanted to show the proof to the Israelis that they could force the Palestinians to swallow it, the proof was the prayer in Masjid al-Aqsa. The Saudis wanted to show that they could stab the Palestinians and sell out the cause and normalize and still pray in Masjid al-Aqsa, that they could still command the Palestinians. The Palestinians gathered around Al-Aqsa Mosque and they said, Wallahi, he will not set foot here in Al-Aqsa. And the Saudi ambassador turned around and said, I have to reschedule. I'll come back another time to pray in Al-Aqsa. And the Israelis were deeply disappointed that bin Salman had shown he can't carry the Palestinians. I think that in terms of the Ben Gurion Canal, I think that Gaza is actually now a hindrance to it. Because Netanyahu was supposed to do it gently, annex the West Bank in the Jenin refugee camp before October 7th. Remember, he'd shaken hands with Erdogan. He had gone to Saudi Arabia twice. With the UAE, an Israeli president, they met. The UAE ambassador here in the US said normalization will not bring any benefit for the Palestinians, but we're happy with the trade deals. We're not going to reverse it. Netanyahu felt that now is the time to take the Jenin refugee camp. So he amassed the forces. People ask why weren't the Israeli forces next to Gaza? It's because they were relocated to the West Bank in preparation for an Israeli invasion of the West Bank. Because he's been trying to do so since 2019. So I think the Ben Gurion Canal, I think that Gaza is a hindrance. It wasn't designed to do it. Netanyahu was hoping that Saudi would normalize and then invest in it. In terms of NEOM, I think that there's a very interesting article in the Atlantic. Bin Salman gave a one-on-one interview where the writer says that the position of NEOM is almost designed to attract the Israelis. It's positioned closer to Jordan. It's almost designed for the Israelis rather than the Saudis because it's in a weird location where it goes. But having said that, even without NEOM, under the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Israeli sports teams have been allowed to participate in the kingdom and enter with Israeli passports. The Israeli national anthem was raised at the EA sports tournaments. Israeli delegations have entered Medina al-Munawwara. Netanyahu has been to Saudi Arabia twice. Benny Gantz admitted it. You can find it. It's very public information. When Oman shut off the airspace to the Israeli flights during the genocide, the Saudis kept it open. Yesterday, Middle East Eye reports there's an Israeli channel that came out and said that the first trucks from Dubai to Tel Aviv has arrived in Tel Aviv and that a land bridge has now been established. The Saudi Crown Prince has said, you can use my land bridge to break the blockade that the Houthis are trying to impose in the Red Sea. Jared Kushner came back from Saudi Arabia and said, the Saudis are telling me that we're ready to normalize. Every 2 days, you hear a Saudi official talking about normalization of ties with Israel. Why? And it links to the last question that was asked, because the Saudi Crown Prince believes that the future, that Qatar normalized with Israel in 1996, and it secured impunity for a number of years in Washington. For those who don't know, long story short, the Emir of Qatar goes to Switzerland to receive medical treatment. His son calls him and tells him, don't come home, I've done a coup. The father in his hospital bed calls Saudi and UAE and says, my son has done a coup, please put me back in power. The son realizes the Saudis are about to invade, so he calls the American and French ambassador and says, listen, if you get Saudi off my back, I will let you establish the largest military base in the region on my territory, and I will establish an economic office to establish ties with Israel. The Americans and French, they scramble, they tell Saudi, don't you dare invade Qatar. And in 2006, to show commitment to normalization, the Qataris received the Israeli president, Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres, Qatar was the first Arab country to receive it. When the UAE saw how Qatar was treated because of normalization, the UAE said, we're going to one-up Qatar. Qatar only had economic office and then it closed it down after the second intifada. And the Qataris, they give lip service for normalization. They say they want it, but they're limited in their action. We will go above and beyond for normalization. And now the UAE is reaping the benefits. There's a genocide in Sudan. Americans don't dare talk about it because they don't want to force the UAE to abandon normalization, because they know the UAE only normalized to secure impunity in Congress. Because the Qatari Prime Minister said in 2018 in a France 24 interview, when the Arabs get close to the Israelis, it's not because they like the Israelis. It's because they see Israel as the key to the Congress and the White House. The UAE believes that the reason there is no coverage in the Congress and in the White House about its violence in Libya, genocide in Sudan, about its machinations between Ethiopia and Somaliland, about its wrestling in Somalia. The reason there's no coverage about any of that is because no one in Congress wants to jeopardize normalization, because the UAE makes it clear, I normalize for impunity. If I don't get impunity, normalization has no benefit. The Saudis are saying that if the Ummah made excuses for Qatar and made excuses for UAE, why can't they make excuses for me? For example, we also Saudi introduced alcohol now in Saudi Arabia again. The Quran got rid of it gradually. Bin Salman is now introducing it gradually. He said it's first for diplomats. When the Qataris held the World Cup, remember initially they said they won't allow alcohol in the World Cup, and then they said no, we'll allow it in certain spaces. When they allowed it in certain spaces, a Saudi writer wrote an article where he said, look how the ummah is making excuses for Qatar, allowing alcohol in certain spaces. This is how we can now reintroduce it in Saudi. We can reintroduce it through this way as well. So if the UAE have certain scholars who promote normalization Islamically, and Qatar has certain scholars that promote this stuff Islamically by saying that at least good is done here, we also have a set of scholars who can justify it as well, the same way they're justifying the concepts of Iggy Azalea and the like. By the way, I didn't know who Iggy Azalea was until bin Salman introduced it to me. And when I came home, my father said to me, Sami, who is Iggy Azalea? And I said, so we Googled her, and don't Google her. Don't. Especially when you're next to your dad. Don't Google her. Stop. But the point here is that, why is, you ask a question, I'll go backwards. Why are the Arab countries not supporting the Palestinians? Why are they standing with the Zionists? It's because bin Salman says that I've been in power since 2017. 2018, Khashoggi was killed. The companies wouldn't come to Saudi Arabia. 2019, Houthis fired missiles. Companies wouldn't come to Saudi Arabia. 2020, 2021, COVID. Companies wouldn't come to Saudi Arabia. 2021, Biden wins the election, calls him a pariah. Companies wouldn't come to Saudi Arabia. 2022, Biden comes in July to fist bump me, but he still talks about Khashoggi. Companies wouldn't come. I'm now 2023, Vision 2030. It's not moving. I'm still stuck with oil. I had to take an extra dividend from Aramco. I had to restructure the PIF, the Public Investment Fund, because it's making huge losses. I'm struggling here. If I normalize with Israel, then the American companies will come rushing in. I have an existential economic crisis. I don't have time to think about Gaza. I need to resolve my economy quickly, because in 2015, when the oil price was low, I burnt through 1/6 of my reserve, which means that in 6 years, I would have been bankrupt. The oil price, I needed $100 a barrel. Right now, it's $80 a barrel. I need these companies to come. They're still stuck in the UAE. If I normalize with Israel, these companies will come. And the second reason I need Israel, not me, but bin Salman, is that Iran has surrounded me. 23 militias to the northern border in Iraq that fire missiles at the Royal Palace in 2019. To the east, I have Iran mainland. To the south, I have Houthis, who are increasingly becoming more 12 Shia in their thought. They used to be Zaydis, now they're becoming increasingly 12 Shia. And the reason they're fighting a war in Yemen in the first place is because they believe that it is wajib for a Muslim to fight to establish a rule for Ahl al-Bayt. Only Ahl al-Bayt are allowed to rule. If anybody else rules, you have to make jihad against them, even if all of the ummah are united behind this individual. The Houthis are now in their 7th attempt to try to achieve this. The Saudis, they say that the Americans didn't come to our rescue in 2019 when the oil facilities were bombed. The Americans are negotiating with the Iranians behind our backs for this Iran deal. I need the Israelis to convince them to protect me against Iran. Wa'iyadhu billah. There are other dynamics, but I'm conscious of the time. Evangelicals and AIPAC. Something very interesting about the evangelicals. And I know anecdotes are bad form, but I think this anecdote is the best way to answer the question. There's an evangelical who supports Zionism, or supported Zionism. And in all of his congregations, he would support the Israelis, support them. Until one day an imam from the East Coast went and met with him, and he said to him, dude, do you know what the Jews say about Jesus? He said, what do you mean? He goes, have you read what they say about him? You know they call him a son of a... He was like, no, show me the proof. He goes, here he is. He said, I never knew that. How dare they? And he said, now let me show you what Muslims say about Jesus. And he said, you know what? I can't believe I didn't know. I can't believe I had no idea about it. Not all of them will have that reaction. My point is, it's worth engaging with them still, even if the evangelicals or the like. Da'wah is very effective. A lot of people get tired of da'wah because they don't like the heat of da'wah. And because they imagine da'wah to be very nice, Teletubby, fairy tale kind of, environment. Like, hi, how are you? Giving out cookies and the thing. And that is part of da'wah, by the way. Like, it is 100%. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to show good character with everybody. Even in the basic salam, like he would do so. Amr ibn As radiallahu ta'ala an has a hadith where he says, the Prophet ﷺ treated me in such a way that I was convinced I was the dearest person to him. This is the same Amr ibn As radiallahu anhu who went to Habasha to bring the Muslims back. An enemy of Islam became somebody who considered himself the dearest person to the Prophet. It shows you what he was like in da'wah. What I'm saying is people like that half of the da'wah, they don't like the other half of the da'wah, which is when you really feel the pressure. Go to these people and talk to them. And that's why I said earlier, public opinion is shifting in an unprecedented way. And it's shifting because we're talking, because we're being loud. If we're shifting public opinion and it's working, we should keep pushing now. Like the momentum is in our favor. Let's keep pushing, given that Gaza has given us a chance like to talk to them or the like. But the final point that I will say is that when it comes to normalization of ties with Israel, ibadallah, I always, and it might sound controversial, but just tolerate me with it. When I was younger and like you'd read the seerah and the life of the Prophet Muhammad and the Sahaba, and then you'd read about Al-Andalus and you'd read about the Umayyads and the Abbasids. There was a question that used to puzzle me. Why did Allah destroy these nations, like Andalus and the like, even though there was a masjid at the end of every street? Even though Ramadan was packed with Taraweeh and Tahajjud. And then I came across two pieces by Ibn Khaldun and Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah said that Allah will preserve a kafir state that is just, but will destroy a Muslim state that is unjust. A Muslim state that believes in him, he will destroy it if it is unjust. Because he said that Allah can tolerate kufr with justice, but will not tolerate Islam with injustice. And Ibn Khaldun said, Al-adlu asasul mulk. Justice is the foundation of all dominion, including Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What makes us love Allah? Because He is the just, the mighty, the one who is fair, the one who, al-muqsit, the one who gives every based on their qist. That's why we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. Allah doesn't just say, submit to me. Allah gives you 99 names, 99 reasons to submit to Him. The point being is that an ummah that believes that the pinnacle of Islam is to be an insular community is destined for failure. Muhammad Asad in his book Road to Mecca, the book that changed my life, I read it at 18 years of age, and it was one of those moments where I thought like, Allahu Akbar, I feel like I can see the world now. Road to Mecca by Muhammad Asad. There's an Arabic version, he wrote in Arabic and English, so there's a Tariq ila Mecca. So Muhammad Asad says that it is not Muslims that made Islam great. It is Islam that made Muslims great. It's not Muslims that made Allah great. It's Allah that made Muslims great. When Islam was the impetus for Muslims to go out and be on the front lines of justice and to keep innovating in their fight against injustice, Allah gave them glory. When Muslims read the Quran, مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ, that the fresh water and the seawater do not mix and between the seas are a barrier. The Muslims of that time did not read it and say, MashaAllah. They had to go out to the seas and they said, Allah said it, I want to see it. When they said, وَالْجِبَالَ أَوْتَادًا, that the mountains are like pegs, the Muslims read it and said, this I need to understand why. It created an impetus to discover, to go out, to give da'wah out. And a friend of mine, Allah yuzkur bkhair, Zaid from El Buruj Press, one day we're coming back from Manchester, and we were talking about these ideas. And he said to me, did you know that only a minority of Sahaba are buried in Medina? Majority are buried outside. And he said to me, notice how their interpretation of Islam was to go out and spread the deen, to go out and stand for justice. For them, the pinnacle of Islam was to be on the front lines. How did the pinnacle of Islam for us become to be in an insular environment where we are relegated and we don't engage? And that's why, for example, when we talk about this issue about normalization, Ibadallah, in my personal opinion and in my experience, I appreciate there are people who say, Sami, you talk too much about the Arab leaders and their transgressions. But wallahi, it's because I saw them buckle when they were called out. In 2021, the Saudis announced a rule, no mosque is allowed to broadcast Taraweeh prayers. The reason why is because bin Salman was frustrated that whenever it was hashtag Saudi Arabia, if you put that on TikTok, it was all Qurra. The Qari of Masjid in Riyadh, the Qari of Masjid in Dammam, a Qari of Masjid whatever. Muslims were just so hooked on these Qurra and discovering new ones. Muhammad Ayyub Allah Yarahmu was discovered in Masjid Quba. If you do hashtag Saudi, it wasn't the raves of Pitbull and David Guetta or the invitation for Nicki Minaj or Mariah Carey or Iggy Azalea in Riyadh. When you did hashtag Saudi, you had to keep going to find those concerts because most of it was these imams praying. So they came up with an idea in which they would restrict hashtag Ramadan to Mecca and Medina. So they said they wanted to ban no masjid was allowed to broadcast Taraweeh prayer live. So people like me who used to watch, Masjid Riyadh and Dammam and some of these others, Khalid al-Dosari, although now he's in Mecca, before he's elsewhere. So in the beginning when the announcement came out, it didn't mention Mecca and Medina. But it didn't say Mecca and Medina was exempt. And there was no clarification from the Haramain for 48 hours. So we started sounding the alarm. We were like, one, what kind of Muslim leader thinks, for what Islamic reason, how does a Muslim leader wake up and say, I need to ban broadcast of Taraweeh prayers? In any context. Some imams will say, we don't need to do it anyway. It never happened in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm like, Ya akhi, taqillah. Ya akhi, taqillah. Why are you bending over backwards to find a ta'wil for it? So a few of us did videos to say, Ya ibadallah, something is dangerous on the horizon. The backlash from the Muslim world and then the English-speaking Muslim world made the Haramain come out and say, we are exempt from it. Ibadallah, did you know, I was sitting with Chris Abdurrahman from Launch Good, and he gave me this very interesting, I mentioned him to give him the credit for this statistic. He said the largest populations in the world are Muslims, 2 billion, China, 1.5 billion, India, 1 billion, America, 360 million. Do you know what the 5th largest population is? English-speaking Muslims, 330 million. The 5th largest population in the world. That's Americans, Europeans, Middle East, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, India, and these places. 300 million, we are English-speaking. That means we are the advocates of Islam to the English-speaking world. We are able to humiliate these leaders in their de-Islamization process to the English world and also communicate what they are doing. The reason why I mention that is you talk about normalization of ties. The reason, if you notice, normalization of ties is always accompanied with a fatwa. It's accompanied by an interfaith dialogue where you have a prominent sheikh who I used to read a lot of his books, wonderful, mashallah, in his eloquence, who comes and says, now we have to suffer in silence. And that there might be hikmah in normalization. The point that I'm saying is, an ummah that doesn't stand for justice, that doesn't condemn what is wrong, is destined to be trampled over. I'm saying that even if perhaps, and I might be a rabbi-raza, and I'm not sure this is the best advice to give you, because I can't lie to you, if I had known in 2014 that it would be the last time for a long time that I would be able to pray in Masjid al-Nabawi, I wouldn't have prayed Fajr in the hotel. I would have gone and prayed it in Masjid al-Nabawi. Some of you guys, you take it for granted. Nowadays, I'm the kind of guy to show you, I'm not a perfect guy by any stretch of the imagination. If I see on Facebook someone puts a picture of the Kaaba, I snooze that account for 30 days. If I see on Instagram they're making dua next to the Kaaba, I hide the account and sometimes I'll even unfollow. It hurts me that I can't see it. I don't know if I want people to go through that by raising their voices against what's happening in the Bilad al-Haramain. But what I do know is, if enough people do it, they can't ban everyone. If enough people do it, and I promise this is where I finish. Somebody said to me, should we boycott Hajj Umrah? I believe categorically no. No. Prophet ﷺ was ready to do Umrah even when Mecca was under the rule of the Quraysh. But there's another reason why I'm against it. For those of you who follow football, and I mean football, I don't mean this game you guys have where you hold the ball with your hand, you go hut with the hand, he catches with the hand, he throws with the hand, he touches down with the hand, and you called it football. I'm talking about football that's actually played with the feet. There is a Ballon d'Or winner, best player in the world, called Karim Benzema, Algerian origin. Karim Benzema was invited to play in Saudi Arabia, and then he gave an interview to The Athletic, which is one of the prominent... People say, Sami, what do you read in the mornings so that we can learn politics? I tell them, I'll be honest with you, I read the gossip section of the football transfers. In The Athletic interview one morning, while I was reading with my tea, English breakfast, Benzema he's asked by The Athletic, why did you give up Real Madrid to go to Saudi Arabia? He said, they invited me to Riyadh. But I said, no, I want to go to Jeddah because I'm Muslim, I want to be close to Mecca. The Saudi Twitter army, they were so angry. They said, what do you mean he came to Saudi Arabia for Mecca, Medina? All we have is Mecca, Medina? This guy doesn't know why he's being paid his big salary. He's coming to celebrate Vision 2030. What do you mean you're coming here for Mecca, Medina? When I saw how angry they were, I said, Ya Rabb, let the numbers of Mecca and Medina always be 1,000,000 times bigger than those who go to those Iggy Azalea concerts. Because when I saw how much it upsets them, that for all of the reforms they're trying to implement, reforms, the Muslims are still going to Saudi because they love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. When I see how much it hurts them, that's why I never believed the Ummah was weak. I always believed the Ummah was strong, and I tell you why, and I promise this is where I finish. Because 1400 years later, the Ummah has gone through a lot of turbulent times. Genocide in Bosnia. Ataturk in Turkey, where he would ban the printing of the Quran and execute scholars. They'd go through colonization in Algeria. Most of the Muslim world was colonized or the like. The reason we don't have colonization today is because the Ummah keeps moving forward. The Ummah gets back up and moves. The Ummah gets back up and keeps going. And not only that, do you know what sums up the Ummah? Is that what upset the French so much when they left Algeria was not the manner in which they left. It was the French said, how is it with our wonderful culture, our civilization mission, where we would line up the hijabis and pull off their hijab and tell them you are now liberated. Quick story, very short. My great uncle, Allah yarahmu, died when he was young, early 20s. Why? Because one day he's walking on the street, his cousin was pregnant, she was walking on the road, 4 French police, they got up, and just because they're racist, they looked at the lady, they said, oh mashallah, they took out machetes and knives, they said, let's see what gender your baby is. Ready to cut open her stomach. He grabbed the rifle and shot towards them to make them run away. That night they came in the night and riddled him with bullets. What the French hated so much was they attacked the Arabic language. They attacked Islam. They taught the Algerians how to speak fluent French. They said, we're teaching them how to be civilized. But when the French were kicked out in 1962, the Algerians did not celebrate in French. Not only did they celebrate in Arabic, it's what they chanted that upset the French. After all that persecution and colonization and brutalization and slaughter and massacre, 1945, 30,000 was slaughtered in 1 week. The Algerians, after 132 years of occupation, they took to the streets of Algeria and they roared, Ya Muhammad Mabruk Alik, Al-Jazair Raj'at Lik. O Prophet Muhammad, congratulations, we have returned Algeria to you. And the French, they said, how is it 1400 years after this prophet has died? These people refuse to give up on him, even though we torture and slaughter them. All they have to do is give it up. Give up La ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah and we will let them go. They prefer to suffer than give it up. How can you tell me an ummah is weak when no matter what it goes through in these last 1400 years, Islam remains the fastest growing religion? And even after the genocide of the Bosnians, Islam is still in the heart of Europe, roaring, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. I went to France and I met a French journalist and he said to me, Sami, on a grand problème, we have a big problem. I said, c'est quoi le problème? What's the big issue? And he said to me, you know the new French generation, their heroes are the Muslim Karim Benzema, Muslim N'Golo Kante, Muslim Zinedine Zidane, Muslim Paul Pogba. Sami, would you accept Antoine Griezmann to be a hero in Tunisia, Algeria? I say, we love our prophet too much. No one can supplant him. When you see these Muslims entering Islam, English Muslims, American Muslims, French, we're not talking immigrants. We're talking the local population becoming Muslims. How can you say the ummah is weak? And that's why, ya ibadallah, I promise this is where I finish. My conclusion of this ummah is this. An ummah that believes itself to be weak, it's not that the ummah is weak, it's that the person saying it doesn't like the idea he has to struggle in this dunya. That they read the Quran about the struggles of the prophets and they say, MashaAllah, look how extraordinary they are, but they don't want to live any life like the prophet. That they say the prophet is our qudwa, but I don't really want to live like the prophet. That they say, MashaAllah, look at Nuh, where he says, Rabbi inni da'utu qawmi layla wa nahara wa lam yazidhum du'ai illa firara wa anni kullama da'utum li taghfira lahum ja'alu asabihum fi adhanihim wa astaghshaw thiyabahum wa asarru wa astakbaru istikbara. That I call on my people day and night, and every time I call on them, they run away. And when I call on them, so you might forgive them, they put their fingers in their ears and they cover. 900 years Nuh is doing it. When I read it, I say, MashaAllah, look at the perseverance of Nuh. But I give up in 1 month. That's why when people say the ummah is weak, the ummah is not weak. Even the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, where he says you will be like the foam of the sea, the Prophet ﷺ doesn't say the ummah becomes weak. He says Allah will remove the fear that's in the hearts of the enemies because you will be afflicted by wahan, which is love of the dunya. And you will hate death, but here meaning you will dislike sacrifice. So in no point in the hadith does he say the ummah is weak. What the hadith means is the ummah will have power but will not be prepared to do the necessary sacrifice to manifest that power. That the ummah has power, but the ones who have it are not willing to go through the process required to manifest that power. They're not willing to go through Uhud. They're not willing to go through Khandaq. They're not willing to go through first 13 years of da'wah. They only want to be Fatih Makkah. They don't want to be Sumayya radiallahu anha who dies before the Prophet ﷺ can give da'wah in public. They don't want to be Musab ibn Umayr radiallahu anhu who dies before Fatih Makkah. They'll celebrate him, but I don't want to be him. He's in Firdaus, but I don't want to go Firdaus that way. They don't even want to be Hamza radiallahu anhu, Asadullah, who dies in Uhud, in the battle where the Muslims are said to have been defeated. They say, yes, Hamza radiallahu anhu is in Firdaus, but I don't want Firdaus this way. I need to be the main character of the story. I need to be in Fatah Makkah, otherwise it's not worth sacrificing or struggling for. Allah, it's not worth mobilizing unless you promise me a bit of your glory, wa'iyadhu billah. So that's my point. I came to, in my opinion, I could be wrong. I'm just telling you my observations. Buna Muhammad the poet says, we are all reflections true, so I can't talk about me without talking about you. When I went around and I saw the ummah, I found it to be very powerful. I found an ummah that never gives up la ilaha Muhammad Rasulullah. And that's why I came to the conclusion, the ummah has never been weak. 90 years ago, the Muslim world was under official colonization. Now it's not. Do you think it's because the colonizers had a change of heart? No. The ummah kicked them out. The ummah made it impossible. So the ummah always has power. The question is whether you're ready to show the patience and perseverance with a process that you don't like, but that you're forced to trust Allah will provide an outcome for it. Which is why going back now, linking it back to the first question, why are we not achieving the outcome that we want? Because Allah has already decided the outcome that He wants. Allah has already decided it. Allah doesn't need us to tell Him what the outcome is. We're just desperately trying to be the vehicles, and Allah has given us these small gains and victories that we've made, and inshallah will continue and will make the difference. And bi'idhnillah, in November, the world will say, MashaAllah, these Muslims, they were ready to suffer 4 years of Trump, but with dignity, rather than the humiliation of allowing Genocide Joe a second term. May Allah elevate you and preserve your efforts, and barakallahu feekum.
We have one sister that has a question. She's waited for some time. Thank you.
So this is going to be our last question, inshallah.
And very brief, I promise. As in, I know I'm taking liberties. I'm sorry.
Assalamu alaikum, jazakumullah khair for giving us hope. My question is, you say, let's punish Genocide Joe with not voting for him, but what if we punish ourselves more with Trump, who will, what's the solution for that? And then the second point, just really quickly, while keeping Gaza and Palestine in our minds, the US is currently bombing Yemen, and even though there are no civilian casualties, the more important thing is the designation of the Houthis, which would lead 70 to 80% of people without aid, which is very similar to the UNRWA cutting of the funds, and obviously the crisis in Sudan, the Uyghurs in East Turkestan. Can you give us more hope for this night to keep going, keep caring for our ummah, inshallah?
Barakallahu fiki, jazakallah al khair. I think that it's important I put you in the picture. Whoever wins in November's election, you're going to have a tough 4 years. Your choice is not about who is the better candidate. Your choice is how you want to struggle in those 4 years. Do you want to struggle with the dignity of people who say you punished a genocide, you punished Genocide Joe, and you brought him down, and you are ready to suffer as a result? Or will you be a humiliated ummah that deliver Genocide Joe to power, you rescue him, and you live 4 years where nobody gives you the time of day because people look at you in the street and they say, subhanallah, they killed 30,000 Palestinians on the other side of the world and they still voted Biden. If we were to assess what is the worst case scenario with Donald Trump, for you domestically, forget foreign policy. Foreign policy, different issue. I would be very controversial and say that aside from moving the embassy to Jerusalem, Trump created a lot of opportunities for Muslims in the Middle East. Erdogan ran wild. The commanders of the American army, they were under so much pressure. Every day they had to try to justify to Trump why American troops were there. For those of you who haven't read James Jeffrey's interview with Al Monitor, go and read it. James Jeffrey was the US envoy to Syria. He said Trump kept telling us every single day, why on earth are we in Syria? And he said the reason why Erdogan was talking to him every day and he was listening to Erdogan more than he was listening to us. Let's calculate it. Let's imagine I'm an American citizen because I speak American now. I can do it a little bit, you know what I mean? Because American ain't English, I tell you that. Is Trump, and I'm not justifying Trump. I'm not saying vote for Trump. I'm saying punish Biden. It's a different message. Is Trump going to send someone to knock on your door and say, I'm handing it over to Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson? Like they own it now. No. Is Trump going to deploy the National Guard to commit a genocide of the Muslims in America? Okay. Trump was in power for 4 years. Did you survive? You survived, yeah? 30,000 Palestinians did not survive 4 years of Biden. I'm not saying that the next 4 years are going to be easy. I actually think that if you succeed in toppling Genocide Joe, you may make it worse on yourselves, but I think that the victory of toppling Genocide Joe, the views expressed are the speaker's own, I think the victory of toppling Genocide Joe will give you momentum to start thinking how to entrench your institutions. And also to develop alliances and have people now listen to you instead of you making all the concessions. I appreciate that's not a hopeful message. But given you already survived 4 years, you can survive another 4 years. Because what I fear is that if Genocide Joe wins the second term, the consequences will be far worse. Our blood will be cheap. Anybody now will be able to commit a genocide and they will know that the Muslims will always vote for them. The Democrats will never take you seriously again. And neither will the Republicans. Because they will say, look at these guys, like you just massacre them and they're just like lost sheep like they come. I know that's not the ideal answer to give to you. But that's why I made a lot of the focus of today on the concept of struggle. Because even for us in the UK, we have an opposition party pro-genocide and a ruling party pro-genocide. We don't even have the opportunity to punish a sitting prime minister. We think about punishing the opposition by saying, you know what, we're going to deny you the opportunity to get to power because right now you're set to win a landslide. We're going to make sure you don't get into power. They're like, but the other guys are worse. Yeah, that's true, but we're going to make sure that it's not said that you can get into power by supporting genocide. Yeah. Well, we're suffering. Next 4 years we're suffering, right? You can suffer with us, Habibi ta'al. In Tunisia, where my father's from, in the village, they have a football match, actual football. So they have a football match. And when you make the teams, somebody who's late, he'll say, نلعب ولا نحرم. Either I play or I make sure no one plays. I'll be honest with you, that's the attitude with which I'm approaching it. And that's out of recognition of the limited powers that I have. But even within those limited powers, I can make lasting consequential impact on American politics and on UK politics by telling people that Muslims cannot be ignored. If Trump comes to power, be an ummah that looks at each other and says, you know what, we toppled Genocide Joe, we showed we can organize each other. Where are the holes in the community that we need to fill? For example, and I know this is going to sound like a petty example. When I came to the US, a lot of US goods in the UK, they have import taxes, so they're more expensive. Now you've all heard the story. I wanted to buy Timberlands when I came here, and I couldn't buy Timberlands because my wife told me this is what the Zionists. And I went, Allah Kareem. Somebody said, Aib alik, how can you say that? I told him, listen, the Prophet ﷺ, when he left Mecca, Allah told him to leave. Prophet ﷺ turned around and he said, Wallahi, you are the dearest land to me. And if your people had not driven me from you, I would never have left you. And that's through the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He told me, Taqillah, how can you apply this to Timberlands? I told him, no, listen. You find it strange because for you, Allah is only relevant in the great things. I know Allah to be relevant in all things, even in the very breath that I take. Allah is as relevant in Timberlands as He is in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. I truly believe that, so I won't tolerate anybody telling me, how did you bring the example here? One student in Berkeley, you guys pronounce it Berkeley, he said to me, how are you finding the boycott? I told him, to be honest, I'm finding it difficult. Not because I'm not committed, I'm fully committed. But where are the alternative Muslim businesses? Yani, where are they? Where's the Muslim version of Timberlands, Muslim version of the Marks and Spencer or the like? And we started talking, and then I had, one of those eureka moments. I said, I have a theory, I think I know why. Ahmed has heard this story many times, mashallah, he's memorized it. You know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where Allah says that Allah loves the hand that gets his rizq. And the hand that takes charity is inferior to that hand. The ummah of today looked at the hadith and they went, MashaAllah, this is good for a halaqah, but in real life we need to add to it, ya Shaykh. Astaghfirullah. They said, Allah loves the hand that gets his rizq. But we need to add to it, loves the hand that gets his rizq from law, medicine and engineering. Because, ya Sheikh, if I'm sitting in my house and my brother has his daughter who's a surgeon, you want me to tell my brother my son makes shoes? You want me to tell my brother my son makes shirts? Because Sami came from London and said he couldn't find Timberlands. Yani, come on, yani. Allah loves this hand, but I need my brother to love it as well. Allah loves these hands, but my pride, ya Rasulullah. The reason I give this example is to show you the subconscious locks that we have in our minds that temper our ability to move as an ummah. The reason why I give this example is, if Trump comes to power, and you never know, only Allah knows the ghaib. I saw Colorado disqualify him from the primaries. Colorado Supreme Court. When November comes, you punish Genocide Joe. I appreciate that it's not the best situation for you in the next 4 years, and I appreciate that I'm going back to London and you guys will have to suffer for it. And I promise you, although I won't regret any word I say in encouraging you to punish Genocide Joe, I will make some dua for you and say, may Allah, make it easy for you all the life. But having said that, to answer your question directly, the next 4 years are going to be tough regardless. We have the ability to punish Genocide Joe and make the Muslim community equivalent to the Zionists in its ability to punish and make people take the Muslim community much more seriously and learn the hadith of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. The alternative is to be a humiliated ummah where the Congress people no longer visit you because they know your votes can be taken for granted because they committed a genocide and you still came back. You have two very difficult options. You have a difficult period coming. I know, sister, wallahi, I wish I could tell you something else. But all I can say from a position of privilege, because I won't suffer it the way you might suffer it. If I was in your position, I would rather suffer 4 years in dignity than humiliation. And may Allah always preserve your dignity, inshallah. آخر شيء. Yemen, you said Yemen. I think that Yemen, bear in mind, inna fi qalbi inna, like my heart hurts to say this because I know who the Houthis are. I know what they've done. I know what they did in Yemen. I know what they're fighting for. I know that they toppled the national dialogue because they want one family to rule. I know they plunged the country into war 7 times. I know all of that, sister. Wallahi, I know all of that. But I do believe that they're doing this sincerely for Palestine. I don't know if that's a good thing. I really don't know. But in the absence of anybody else doing anything, I'm very wary of criticizing them for it. The Americans are trying to get the Iranians to rein them in. The Americans are telling the Iranians that we will rein in Netanyahu, but please don't escalate. The Houthis are saying we don't take our orders from Iran, we're going to keep going into the Red Sea. But I think that the Houthis have been excellent in exposing the hypocrisy, firstly, of the Americans, but also unity of the Ummah. The hypocrisy in that, the Houthis are only stopping ships going to Israel. Other ships are going through, Adi, no problem. It's only the ships going to the Israel that the Houthis are stopping. The Red Sea is not blocked. Any other ship is going through, no problem. But the Americans believe that Israeli cargo is worth more than the Palestinian lives. And now that's on full display for everybody, even those who supported Israel yesterday. I'm seeing the shift in that narrative. And the second thing is, it is heartwarming and reassuring that Muslims are able to set aside some differences. And I say this with a very heavy, heavy, heavy heart, because the Iranian proxies have killed more of the Sunnah than Israel have killed the Palestinians. That Palestine is a case that is so dear to us that we are able to temporarily suspend our differences to focus on punishing Genocide Joe. And I think that is a maturity in the Ummah which I hope will lead us to take an interest in more issues, because the other side that breaks my heart is Yemenis cried out to the Ummah for 9 years to tell them about the Houthis, and the Ummah wasn't interested. The Pakistanis today are crying out because Imran Khan is in prison now, sentenced 10 years. They're crying out for the Ummah to speak about it. The Ummah's not speaking about it. It's like, it's Pakistan, I don't know anything about it. All I know is they play cricket and I don't even know if it's a sport. You see in Sudan, the UAE supported Hemeti's militia for one reason only. Because when Umar al-Bashir's government fell and the Sudanese thought that they did a revolution, Washington and the UAE said, what revolution? We impose sanctions for a reason. Now the next people have to listen to our terms if they want the money. So these leftist parties, they came, the UAE came. They removed Islam from the constitution. They normalized ties with Israel. And when the general they made an agreement with said, yeah, Jama'ah, why do we need to hand over power to these parties? They'll never win an election. Why don't you let me rule? If we're all agreed that we won't do elections because we think the Islamic parties will win, then why don't I just rule and I'll make sure they don't win? Then the UAE said, this guy is annoying us, militia, ta'ala, try and topple him. They plunged the country into war. Why? Because the UAE said to the Americans, and this is in the New York Times, the dark prince of the Middle East, that these are a people in the region, they believe a 1400-year-old book should be a constitution. Do you really want these people to choose their leaders? Do you want a repeat of Tunisia, of Libya, of Egypt, where you leave people to choose freely for Islam to be in the heart of their society? I'm not saying Ikhwan represented Islam. I'm saying people voted for Ikhwan because they believe them to be the representatives of Islam. And then in Tunisia, as we see, when they felt that they didn't, that they had abandoned a lot of the Muslim causes, the Tunisians still believe in Islam, but don't believe that Ikhwan are the means through which to get Ikhwan. Rightly or wrongly is a different issue. But the point that I'm saying is, I'm hoping that an ummah that wakes up for Palestine and will start to read about Yemen and realize who the Houthis are, they will read about other issues as well and lend their support to make a difference in those countries as well, because we're one ummah, one body. And when I read about Ibn Kathir and Ibn Khaldun talking about the politics of the ummah from Morocco all the way to Jakarta, and they do it as if it's normal because we're one ummah, I ask myself, when did the ummah become a community where it says, I don't get involved in that because that's their issues as well? Barakallahu fikum. Barakallahu akbar. Allahu akbar. Allahu
So,
akbar.
on your behalf of MIC, just want to thank our brother Sami. Jazakallah khair for this. And one thing that we have agreed here in our community is that inshallah we will not be downers. We will not suck the energy or the optimism of one another, but inshallah we work to inspire and continue to encourage one another. And thank you for doing what you have done and said what you have said this evening. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make all your efforts fruitful, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May you continue to enjoy the 27-degree weather and all that, Ya Rabbi, and Jazakumullah khair to all of you. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk wa sallallahu wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad.